Hi, my name is Jeremy O'Harris, and I'm so excited to be here having this conversation with the outrageously talented, supremely important Stephen Winter about his debut film, Chocolate Babies. I'm so thankful to NewFest for putting this film on display for everyone to see in their Queering the Canon section with associations from BAM and BT. So, with no further ado, Stephen Winter.
Jeremy.
Hi, Stephen.
Good morning, my beautiful friend. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
I mean, you need no introduction. I've been in awe of you since we first met many, many years ago, talking about Jason and Shirley, yes, and both our shared love of Jason Holiday and the film Portrait of Jason, and watching this film for the first time this year, really like rocked me to my core because once again I felt as though I was meeting someone whose sensibilities so completely aligned with mine, and whose career has not had the type of sort of overwhelming celebration that I know it deserves. And so I'm so excited that I get to be here, a part of this celebration of you and your work. And I think my first question for you is, what happened to faggots with guns? Like, why haven't I seen any faggots with guns since the 90s?
Well, what happened to faggots with guns? All right. I guess the medium to short answer of that is respectability politics. Sarah Schulman quoted an experience of Larry Kramer, the late great, where she came to him during the ACT UP years and said, "Look, Larry, we got all these women and Latinx people and Black people who are working so hard in ACT UP and are doing so much stuff. There's so much central to the organization. But every time the press comes, it's always the gay white guys who are talking to the press. And can't you do something about that?" And to quote Sarah, quoting Lara, she said, "Well, but don't you want us to put forward our best people?"
No.
Yeah, yeah, because of course, the when you look at the history of queerness in the 20th century, you're looking at the history of white gay men and white queer men who are only ostracized from the rest of society because they are queer. But other than that,
Mhm.
they can represent all the privileges and own those privileges. So they spend their time doing, amongst other things, isolating and carving out from themselves people of color and women, Black people especially. So when you get to the 90s, and the only film in cinema canon that has a Black gay man as its star is Portrait of Jason by Shirley Clark, that's just one film out of the
Yes.
thousands which are canonized for various purposes. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Psycho, Rear Window, Portrait of Jason, Woman Under the Influence. These are like part of the canon, and we are not represented. We
Yes.
Black queens are not represented, and we are angry. And when I came up as a kid in the 90s, and I'm popping up and doing my thing, I was young enough that I did not have the experience of all my friends dying of AIDS.
Hmm.
I was old enough that I had the experience of meeting incredible Black gay men and Black queer men who were in their 30s and 40s who were HIV positive, and then burying them within a year or two or three. So my fathers, my uncles, my daddies, I
Yeah.
meet them and then they were gone. So the isolation in which the isolation of what that experience created was very much, well, I'm not literally going to get a gun, but I do certainly want other people to get guns, and I want to fantasize about what it would be like if the energy of the ballroom and the energy of the peers and the energy that was in the Black Gay Theater that was
Yes.
big in the 90s. The most of the Chocolate Babies cast came from the Black Gay Off-Broadway theater that I was lucky enough to be to have access to, because they could put on theater productions. I saw an all-Black queer version of King Lear set in the ballroom scene, and it starred 3 of the stars who turned up to be in Chocolate Babies. It was ridiculous. It was sickening how great it was. In a loft space in the West 30s.
Wow.
You know,
That's phenomenal.
yeah. And how did I get there? I met someone at a bar who knew somebody, and they gave me a flyer, like a piece of paper. Come here on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to be doing House of Lear. House of Lear. Forget who the playwright was who adapted it, but yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out. I mean, you know, this is reaching to something that was so exhilarating about watching your film, which was the fact that I constantly am butting up against the sense that not just queer cinema, but Black cinema, Black storytelling, queer storytelling has become so deeply anesthetized and lobotomized, so that now there seems to be no personality, because there seems to be no interest in showing the complicated, ugly, dirty parts of both the process and our psyches and our storytelling. And I wonder, outside of the anger you were feeling in that moment, what was it about exploring to tell the story the way you decided to tell it?
Well, I'll tell you. I was as influenced by. I'm sorry, there's a plane going overhead. I hope it's not too. I. You fell down. I was as inspired by Humphrey Bogart movies as I was by the new queer cinema that was going on at the time. And I was inspired by, like, Willie Ninja, who is well known from the Paris is Burning documentary, The Amazing
Yes.
Ogre. He was a friend of mine. And the reason he was a friend of mine is because he was around in the West Village. And we liked each other. He liked me. And he would just be around being very friendly. He knew everybody and doing his thing. And so part of being a kid in the 90s in New York was, oh, it's Friday night. Let me go to the West Village and walk around and see if Willie's around. And he might be, and there he is, and he'll do some stuff. He'll talk some jazz. He'll kiki a little, and then he will like get real serious and fierce about something, you know, because that's just how the energy flows. There's no cell phones, of course, you know, so everything is just sort of happening, and that is where the swirl of these experiences came that invented this story. It's a what if story. What if a bunch of these kind of queens mixed with like the punk rock dykeness of Nona Hendrix from LaBelle and Grace Jones, that Afro punky thing. What if they all swirled up together and they got with an outsider, an Asian kid, who was half in the closet? Because the other thing back then, Jeremy, everybody was on some level in a part of the closet.
Yes.
Like when you would go on the first dates with people, part of the date was, so who are you out to? Somebody. Like my parents know, but my sister doesn't know. Like they know at work, but they don't know what. It's always a thing, because that's how life was. We compartmentalized. So what if there was a group of people who had compartmentalized themselves into their own club, and they were doing actions that were based on my experience in Chicago as a teenager in the late 80s, working with ACT UP. And then after 3 glorious months of stomping around, I gave a speech about how racist they were and left. Because that's what was up. And it all just, you know, when you're a kid, things can swirl, you know,
Yes.
and the self-censorship of or you should avoid the self-censorship of saying, like, just because I'm putting together all these different things doesn't mean it's not right.
Yes.
And I had an innate sense of structure, and I had a great memory for what queens were saying to me. So like the larva is based on a real person whose name was Larry Warren, who was a big deal in the Chicago house music scene. He's the one that took me to see Frankie Knuckles perform at the Clubhouse. When I was a kid, I was able to go to church with Frankie Knuckles presiding because I was intersecting with these Black queens who were living large and proud in the west side of Chicago. And some of the things that Larva says in my movie are things that Larry said to me.
Phenomenal.
Either wrote down on pieces of paper and kept, or just remembered because they were so fucking hysterical. And yeah, so I was channeling. I was doing a version of a Yoruba channeling.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you channel, but you also have this, like, dense knowledge of cinema history that is unparalleled, I think. And I think
It's
that,
true.
that's something that I really admire, because that's something that I hold dear as a theater maker. Is the only thing that no one can fight me on. You can say you don't like my plays, you can say that you don't understand what I'm doing, but you can't fuck with my relationship to the canon, right? Because I've read it all. And
Yes.
I feel like that type of rigor is really rare, and something that I think oftentimes we don't privilege in Black or queer cinema, and that even if it exists, we ignore its existence. So I'd love to talk to you. So you mentioned Humphrey Bogart. Who else were you drawing from as you were building the story and thinking of your chocolate babies? Like, how were you? Because I saw, like, echoes of Fassbender in the way in which you were, like, dealing with their domestic lives. I saw, echoes of, like, soap opera in some of the ways in which their, like, love languages were expressed. How did those things all coalesce in your film, and what were you drawing from?
Well, Fox and his friends,
Yes.
Fassbender, you definitely hit the nail. This is part of the VHS era, so part of that generation of people, like, you go and you just pull things from the shelf, and so Fassbender was in the mix, definitely. Repo Man by Alex
Oh, yes. Oh my God.
is
Yes.
is a heavy influence on it, just like accepting the weird. Um, but also, like, the great Black vaudevillians like Sanford and Son, the Jeffersons. One of the things that I try to explain to young people is that if you look at the Jeffersons with Sherman Hemsley and Roxy Roker, and those are the peers of James Earl Jones and Cicely Tyson. They came up
Yes.
the same cauldron of theater that they did, and they are the ones who taught Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington, and that generation are taught by the same people who did the comedy in the 70s, and that's why they brought a gravitas to it. When if you watch those shows, you see the vaudevillian humor, the hey 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 of it all, but you can also see the pain and the
Yes.
fury of this generation of Black artists who grew up in segregation like we can't conceive of.
Yes.
Isabel Sanford who played the Mrs. Jefferson, mother Louise, was Tallulah Bankhead's companion for many years.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
so she was in the theater, but she's a Black woman, so she can only do so much.
And
And
was
so
she also queer?
I look at the Jeffersons and I see an all queer cast.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
back when I was a kid, the older heads told me that Sherman Hemsley was gay, and I'm going to claim him as that. Roxy Roker was definitely fabulous. She's Lenny Kravitz's mother.
Yes.
And Isabel Sanford was, for many years, the companion to Tallulah Bankhead, who's one of the queeniest queens of all time. Makes Betty Davis look like Jennifer Aniston. So
Yes.
that rigor going into this performance, and the cast of Chocolate Babies appreciated all that. So they knew how to balance a sort of a vaudevillian hoo-ha with real pathos and the real lived experience of Black in America that went past me, because they were all older than me. I was a kid,
Mhm.
and I was really relying on them, which I just knew they could do, is to bring that stuff in, which I was referring to, but that they understood. Because and I was blessed because I was a pretty punk kid, and I was drawing from the idea that if we just bring it together, then it will happen. So that was also part of the John Cassavetes of it all. So I was also very influenced by Shadows
Shadows, yes.
and Woman Under the Influence, because as scary as Woman Under the Influence was in the VHS era, because we didn't quite understand what was happening and it was an told story, it also was funny.
Yes.
You know, when kids watch Under the Influence now, they see the humor better because the style of Under the Influence has infiltrated everything. You know, being the most influential cinema actress in the history of the world, everyone's drawing from her. Everyone's drawing from Mabel Longetti because of where I was situated in the East Village, in the queer world, adjacent to the white queerness and Black queerness. I was able to see like, okay, this is scary and intense, but it's also something funny going on here.
Yes.
Funny, all this spaghetti shit is funny that she's doing. So I brought that influence into it as well. And as for the Bogart of it all, that was because Bogart plays tough guys who have a lot of heart, but they have blocked themselves off to the community. They don't want to make a choice of what they're going to do. Are they going to work for themselves or are they going to work for the cause? And they end up working for the cause. So that was part of the overall character arc that I was building. You know, I really wanted to be Lauren Bacall and to meet a Bogart. It was a fantasy.
That is so beautiful. And and you know, it's a type of sensibility that I think feels very rare because those aren't the influences that I see readily on the tongue of young filmmakers now. You know, if I feel like I hear the same three filmmakers, you know, I hear PTA, I hear Scorsese, and you know, maybe Barry Jenkins now, you know. But like very rarely are people going to the grit and the raw of like classic independent cinema, or even beyond that to like classic, you know, marquee cinema, you know. And I wonder, you know, as you look at this film and what bringing it to Queering the Canon might do for the legacy um, of like filmmakers who are watching this now in their nascent, what do you hope that people take from the movie and like take from what you were, you know, feeding the children? You were a child when you were feeding us this meal, but now, you know, you're older and you know what meal you prepared.
Sure. Whenever I watch it in the last 10 years or so, I'm always struck at how sweet it is underneath everything. I was apparently a sweetheart and almost a gooey sentimentalist. And I give a lot of honor now to my 24-year-old self, who was that, or however old I was, who was that sweet underneath
Yes.
rack attack, attack, tack, tack, you know, and like, fuck you and do this and la 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 and blah blah blah. All that's great, but underneath all that, or really on the surface of it, was this yearning sweetness of connection. And I'm always so proud of that boy for being so open-hearted, and I feel like I've turned out very much into the adult that that kid was yearning to be, because I've retained that sweetness despite the endless difficulties. Like, so for watching it today, you know, enjoy the comedy, relish in the outrage. You know, the one, like, I did curse out Act Up Chicago for being racist, but the core of their mission was very important to me. And
Yes.
when we took over Cook County Hospital and other things like that, I will never forget those formative experiences at 17, 18, taking the streets as a queer person and demanding there's zero reason why our people should be dying like this. You know, there's no reason why a virus can't be solved. It is an outrage, and Black people are dying quicker and more painfully and in greater numbers in comparison to the percentage of the population. That was true for AIDS back in the 80s and 90s. It's true for coronavirus today. It is always true. So understand when you're watching this that part of the sanctity of Black life is the twinning of the outrage and the heart. Find those things. You can stand for Black lives.
Yes.
And you,
I love that. Do you do you think, one of the things I think about when I watch this was my own type of anger is the fact that, there were a handful. I'm not going to say like all of them ended up making it out of nuclear cinema, but a handful full of directors who are making work much like yours made it out of nuclear cinema and into the like arms of Hollywood. Do you have any rage about that? What are your feelings about the ways in which your film has had to be in a program called Queering the Canon and wasn't just immediately thrust into it?
Well, okay. Do I have rage and is it outrageous? Yes, yes, it is absolutely outrageous. I remember sitting in Washington Square Park, reading my Variety review, which was meh, and I was like, you guys suck. You've missed it so hard. But that is the score because it's 1996 and I'm black and queer in a world where the only people who are allowed to be white and queer are a handful. You can count them on two hands. And they're peers and they're wonderful. And I was friends with most of them, still am really. But, we can tell now, like Weinstein was in charge of things.
Yeah.
When Weinstein is in charge of things, and then the trickle down of that is going to be, well, look, in the 90s, when I was a kid, I got to meet and befriend the jazz singer, composer, actor, and legend, Abbey Lincoln.
Okay.
Any of you guys or gals who are watching this do not know who Abbey Lincoln is, Google her right now or when this is finished and get into Abbey Lincoln. And one of the things that was extraordinary about this, because she started out in the 50s as a beautiful woman doing supper club singing. Then she met Billie Holiday, only the once. And by age 25, she became a serious jazz performer, composer, and singer. And she refused to, and as she went forward, she refused to continue to do kittenish singing and Margaret stuff. She wasn't going to do any more Marilyn Monroe or My Man Done Me Wrong songs. She was only going to sing about things that were important to her.
Mm.
And as a result, she was never a top tier jazz singer. She became a movie star for a couple of years, and she became an important figure in the bohemian world. She wore an afro before Nina Simone. She was friends with Lorraine Hansberry. She was friends with Baldwin, the whole thing. But it was always Sarah Vaughan, Carmen McRae. Those are the top jazz singers. And then the 80s came and wiped out jazz as a main pillar of American music as an art form. And then when the 90s came around, one of the last people standing was Abbey Lincoln, who was now fully realized composer, band leader, thinker, active citizen, and captain of the ship, because everybody else was gone, and she turned 60 and turned out all these amazing albums, most of the songs of which she had written, not one of them about Man Done Me Wrong songs. And she was someone who was, she was friends with Miles Davis. She was there with Coltrane. And now she's in her 60s, completely within her faculties, completely, fully empowered by her art. That's the era when I got to meet her. And she was happy to have some kids come in. I'm one of the many kids who were involved in her life from the 90s. Rhonda Ross, who's Diana Ross's daughter.
Yes.
And we got to go listen to Mother Abbey, and she would tell us things. And one of the things she told us were the experiences she had in show business when they were tempting her with, well, come play this maid on TV. And Abby, I am not playing a maid on television. Somebody else can do that, and that's fine, but I'm not doing that. So until the industry catches up, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do whatever it is that I'm doing. And for a while, she was living, in LA above a garage, but she was doing it fabulously and on her own terms. And she was thinking, she was active during all this stuff. And her legacy is beyond reproach. So beyond perfection is Abbey Lincoln. She's up there with Cicely Tyson. So in a way, I was prepared well by that relationship. If you're going to do it the way you're going to do it, it all depends on what era you are born in. Now, you were born
Mhm.
in an era where, and it's still miraculous, because when I met you, you were a lad with big dreams, big hair and big dreams, and big place that you were occupying. And one of the things that you said to me, you didn't say it in words, you said it with your eyes. I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for it. And I said to you with my eyes, go for it. Let's see what happens. Maybe this time it's going to work.
Hmm.
And boy, did it work.
Thank you,
Yes,
Stephen.
yes, it did. And you carry with you, among other people, not just Abby Lincoln, but all the other people, all the other artists and playwrights and artists and filmmakers who have come through and were coming up in a time when it was institutionally inconceivable for them to do the things that they could do.
Hmm.
Um, I am still, I'm now living in a place where it is conceivable that the things I can do can be done, and the work that I've already done can be not only rediscovered but financially restored and brought to bear, and it will always be great because it's timeless. By putting my actors in the fanciful costumes, I successfully made it not a 90s piece.
Hmm.
It has a timeless quality that belies the year it was made. And outside of a couple of 90s looking jeans that happen every, the film does not feel like the mid 90s.
No.
And and that's just a part of my innate youthful genius, because that wasn't exactly the idea that I had. The reason I put them in the outfits is because that's what they're supposed to wear. The end result is the film has a timeless quality. So lucky us. And that I bring that to the place, going back to Mother Abby Lincoln. She explained to me how we artists are bringing in forces from the ancestry.
Hmm.
And that's part of why she stopped singing My Man Done Me Wrong songs, because the ancestry didn't want her to sing that stuff anymore. And she doesn't want to go through that anymore. So she wanted to come through other things. And she did. And she told me stories about that generation of woman artists and what they were channeling through. So the next time you see a woman, a Black woman who was an artist and was working in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, understand you're seeing the tip of that iceberg in terms of what that artist was doing. Black women artists of that generation, unbelievable. And that's part of
Yes.
what taught me. So that's part of how I got there.
I mean, and that's what I see in your work. I mean, when I talk to you and when I witness your work, I feel like I'm being bombarded with like decades and decades and decades beyond your years of references and experience that help me make sense of my own place in the like sort of larger time space continuum of making work, but
Yeah.
also gives your work an even bigger reach. And so I wonder, as we start to wrap up, what's next for you? Like, what's on the horizon? What are your dreams right now?
Um, I have,
Because before you start, I just want to say this for the room, for everyone watching. You are the godfather of New York queer cinema. You are the godfather. Everyone that has come from New York and has made a queer film has knocked on your door and said, Stephen, can you give me some notes? Stephen, what do you think? And I've heard it from them, and I know that it's true.
yeah.
I I wonder now what is going to be next for you, because I don't know that your legacy is just in being the great mind behind so many of the films that are in the Criterion, in the movies, and in all these other collections. I'm excited to see like the 15 other Stephen Winter films.
Well, thank you again for a lovely contextualization of my legacy thus far. Um, I have, in the last few years, been working on some science fiction materials, some satirical, um, dystopian comedies, which one of which got made into podcast form on the Night Vale Network called Adventures in New America, which was received quite well. The New York Times called it the best social thriller is a podcast. That was the headline, and they were correct. So I've got materials in that vein. I'm here in a compound in Palm Springs because I've been brought into a possible television experience that would encompass a lot of my interests, including being pink and fabulous. So and being black and fabulous. So I can say no more on that right now, but we're hoping that will come to fruition. And I'm now at the age and the weight where I have the confidence to jump into pretty much anything. Well, not anything, but plenty. I'm versatile. I'm a forward thinker, and things come alive when I'm around them. Like the reason the actors perform the way they do for me is because they look into my eyes and they can see the fire. You know, the fire it's flickering, it's orange, it's red, it's ever changing. You put your hand through it, you feel nothing. You put your hands in it, you burn.
Yes.
That is I. And the reason for that is because, respects, Rastafari. I've been brought through by the greats. My father was a Jewish immigrant who escaped the Nazis. My mother was a Jamaican Rastafari who escaped British colonialist rule. They came together in the Midwest. They made me, my brother, and my sister, and they gave us the temperament to do the things that needed to get done. So I survived everything so far. I can keep going. I'm doing it for a lot of people. A lot of white brothers and sisters who fell by the wayside. A lot of our black people are gone. You know, I saw a clip of Willie Ninja bringing him back into the picture like a week ago. And I was like, oh my God, he's so young. It was like such a young picture of him or footage of him doing his thing. And I said to my friend, I was like, I was friends with Willie. Willie liked me, you know, and that was part of that. And sitting in that sentence was like, Willie Ninja liked me.
Yeah.
You know, and so in the name of all those people who looked at me and said, okay, I see you and it's good. Keep going. I will keep going. And when the legendary children of today, they give you stuff. They really give you stuff. Like I am now, you know, not quite, but almost senior, you know, captain of the boat, you know, senior officer on deck. And I've been well trained to take that position, and I'm doing it. So yeah,
you've done it incredibly well.
I've also been acting, you know, something that you and I talked about all those years ago. You're like, are you an actor? I was like, well, I'll do it if somebody wants me to do it. But the last couple of times people have asked me to do it, I was really good.
Oh my God.
That made me think, oh yeah, I should, whatever movie I make next, I should probably have a big part in it. I should probably act in it as well. I should do a true Cassavetes.
Oh, I love.
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well,
let's
Steven,
play Husbands in something.
Oh my God, I would love that.
Let's remake Husbands.
Great. I'm down. We've heard it here.
Okay,
Let's
that's the new project.
Yes, Husbands.
2023. You,
yes.
me.
Yes. I'll be. You be. No, we should
What?
do it set like right in Hoboken, in New Jersey.
Beautiful. You be the Peter Falk.
Yes. Done. Oh my God, Steven, this has been amazing. I feel so privileged once again that New Fest wanted me to do this with you. It was such a dream, and I'm so sad we're not in the same place. I hope everyone enjoyed the film. Please keep subscribing to New Fest programming. Check out what's happening with BET and BAM. And I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Hopefully, you know, Pfizer's keep us going strong.
All right. Jeremy, I love you. I'm so
love you.
Happy for you. And I You are a dream that that I had years ago come to fruition. You are a dream, and not just for me. So that's just, I passed that along because that is what was meant for to be said right now. So
Thank you,
thank
Stephen.
you.
Thank you. This, like,
Yeah.
again, like I said last on Twitter today, this was a film made completely in my image, and I'm angry that I feel robbed of this film canonically. And I'm so happy that I was able to experience it again. So,
Yes.
bye bye, everyone, and thank you.